American negotiators in Ghent, in modern-day Belgium, in late November 1814. It is a working session, and they reflect on how they gained the upper hand in the negotiation of the British. Scenario 3 is back in Washington with President Madison after the arrival of the Treaty of Ghent, signed, sealed by both the American and British commissioners. Gentle reminder to turn your cell phones off. So if you have an opportunity, please turn them off now. Sit back and enjoy the short play. The gentleman will be available after the play to engage in discussion of your pleasure. And now we are pleased to present From Plattsburgh to the Pieces.
Well, there it is, the President's house, what's left of it. 8 years to construct, but a few moments to destroy. The home Mrs. Madison and I will never occupy again. I remember the day so clearly. August the 24th, 1814. Hazy, hot, humid, with tensions running high and frantic awareness heavy in our hearts and in the air. I began my day at dawn with a meeting of our commanders at the Navy Yard, while Mrs. Madison waited at the President's house, and ended my day not knowing if she was safe. At the British approach, the pandemonium was at a fever pitch, as everyone was fleeing the city pell-mell. We were off to the races, all right, but it wouldn't be the horses that were running. Mrs. Madison had her pet bird sent here to the Octagon House after she had already gathered all our important papers and had them secured to a safe location. We wouldn't be entertaining guests that night, at least not the ones we wanted. She waited till the moment of her peril to ensure that Mr. Stewart's copy of the painting of His Excellency General George Washington, our first president, was safely evacuated. An act of courage that I hope our country will ever be grateful for. At about 4 p.m., I returned to the President's house to find with relief that Mrs. Madison had been escorted safely from harm's way. The plan was to meet up at an appointed rendezvous, but circumstances did not allow us to find each other until the following day. At about 2 a.m. the following morning, a tremendous explosion was heard. It was so powerful it shook entire buildings. I knew what it was. It was the Navy Yard. I had instructed that it be destroyed should it be imminent that it was to fall into enemy hands. Then at about 2 p.m., a series of bizarre weather events began to unfold. A perfectly nice day would turn into a vicious storm, the likes of which I may never see again. It started innocently enough, with clouds being blown in by a breeze, until they thickened and darkened to the point where it was seen that it was a pitch-black night, and only the shards of the white lightning punctuated the darkness, and the thunder crashed and boomed so loudly that it startled us and seemed so ominous, until the clouds became so pregnant with rain that they discharged a weapon of their own. You see, that rain was not just a drenching cataract of water, but musket ball-sized hail that pummeled anyone who could not find refuge. The wind became so blustery, it too became violent. Men could no longer stand against it. Trees were uprooted, and roofs were blown off buildings and hurled through the air like sheets of paper. And cannon were lifted as if levitated by a mysterious power and set aside to rest elsewhere. But nay, this was not the end of this bizarre spectacle. A whirling cone of wind was spotted in the distance, twisting and turning and taking aim of its own, putting everything in jeopardy that might be in its path. Those sights, though difficult to behold, stand as a testament to our country's resolve. Although war is always a last resort to a resolution of conflict, the momentum towards war had been building for so many years. I see the wind works in magical ways. Perhaps a retrospective can reveal for you the trail of reason that led to my decision to request from Congress a declaration of war on June the 1st, 1812, of which they granted on June 18th of the same. The crying enormity of impressment of our sailors on the high seas had been going on for the past 7 years, since 1807, with the boarding of our own USS Chesapeake by the HMS Leopard, right in our own Virginia coastal waters. Preventing the question of territory. Great Britain was not maintaining her commitment to evacuating our forts in her western parts. She continued to court the natives to keep that territory in a state of unease for our citizens. It was deemed her duty as part of the Treaty of 1783 and reinforced with the Jay Treaty of 1795. Why, 29 years of that effrontery could no longer be tolerated. Preventing the legal flow of trade. I said to Ambassador William Pinckney 4 years ago that it was impossible not to see that the avowed object was no longer to retaliate on an enemy, but to prevent legitimate commerce. Yes, the war is necessary to protect the means of our economy and to secure and vindicate our independence. I had taken Mrs. Madison to Philadelphia back in 1805 to have an infected knee treated by the renowned Dr. Physic. I stayed with her while writing my longest work to date that refuted Great Britain's rule of 1756 as illegal according to international law. Great Britain continued to ignore its consequences, so President Jefferson and I implemented a trade embargo in 1807. It failed, as Mr. Gallatin said it would, but still, we wanted to pursue means of peaceful coercion as an alternative, civilized alternative to bloodshed. So we modified it in 1809 to stipulate that the trade limitations would only be imposed on the principals in the affair, Great Britain and France. But some of our northern states became mercenary in their pursuits of their livelihoods. The New England states even threatened secession from our union to realign with Great Britain, a frightful notion that thankfully did not come to pass. So when the Russians offered to mediate between us and Great Britain last year, I seized the opportunity. I sent Mr. Gallatin, foreign-born himself in Geneva, and accustomed to the trickeries of European diplomacy, to join with Mr. John Quincy Adams, our most experienced diplomatist, already stationed in St. Petersburg, to treat with Tsar Alexander I to endeavor to bring an end to this war. We could not make an impression with this effort, so the war was forced to rage on until a most glorious victory was secured on September the 11th of this year. There are bright and shining moments to celebrate. When I heard the reports of the strategic naval and land victories at Plattsburgh, New York, under the masterful guidance of Commandant McDonough and General Macomb, I knew that it would embolden our negotiating stance in Ghent and be a most persuasive bargaining chip in bringing this war to a speedy and resolute conclusion.
Mr. Gallatin, I tell you, New England fishermen will never give up the rights to fish in Canada.
Ooh, close to the speaker.
But, sir, neither will Mr. Clay agree to the English being afforded free navigation down the Mississippi, nor should we allow them to do so. The fish, however, would be happier, I think.
Sir, my father fought hard in Paris in 1783 that the New England fishermen would have the right, sir, to fish and to dry their catch on unoccupied, uninhabited Canadian lands. I will not let his efforts go undone.
My dear sir, I would not have it so if it were possible. However, it will be difficult to convince the rest of the nation that New England's desires should be accommodated when their only interest appears to be self-interest. The question would be asked, why should we give up peace when the northern states have benefited from not having to fight that war? I do not know that answer, sir.
Mr. Gallatin, as usual, you go straight to the heart of the matter. As much as it pains me to admit it, but what do we do?
We remember, my dear sir, the essentials. That when most it looked bleak, that is, of course, when the character of our people showed itself most greatly. Oh, indeed, not as we've heard about the federal city and the disastrous military decisions that led to the burning of the Capitol and the President's house. Those, sir, were moments of shame. And yet there were brighter moments yet to come. Even as we first met with the English commissioners in August of this year of 1814, even then, unknown to us, events were beginning to come together to make it clear to England that she could not, no sir, could not win this war. After all, even after the burning of that federal city and the dispersal of our soldiers and Marines gathered to defend it, the British would bomb for a day and a night in Baltimore Harbor and fail to reduce Fort McHenry. And England would land her soldiers at 2 points on either side of the city and be repulsed. Oh, indeed, sir. But that was not the best of it, not at all. We have now an opportunity to utilize a most glorious victory won by both our army and our navy in our negotiations.
Sir, I remember when the news arrived, Plattsburgh, the defeat of Plattsburgh. It arrived after about 2 weeks of horrifying reports and newspaper articles about the burning of the White House in Washington. This news arrived with other news of the taking of Machias, Maine, and together with our failure of our attempt to take Michilimackinac in Upper Michigan. Shortly thereafter, the British sent us their 5th note demanding that the treaty would be signed on the basis of ote possidetis, which, as you know, means keep what you gained by force. Then, still referring to my diary, October 21st was the day we heard the news of their attempt to take Baltimore.
They were indeed gloomy days for us.
And then, referring to my diary, I remember this day very well. October 25th was the day of Jubilee of my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. I wrote to my mom But I also wrote to the Secretary of State, and I told him, considering the situation with the British, I felt there was no hope for peace.
So, Mr. Adams, when do you feel we began to gain the upper hand in our negotiations?
Well, a mere 3 days later, October 28th, Mr. Saltus brought us news of the American naval victory on Lake Champlain and the capture of the British fleet and the subsequent retreat of Sir George Prevost and his army back to Canada. This news was exactly the type of news we wanted. It strengthened our position with the British. I think this was the turning point in the negotiations for us. However, we have heard that there was one more throw of the die by the British, and that we may have heard that they lost their General Ross in Maryland, but they had other London Times reports that Sir Edward Pakenham, the Duke of Wellington's brother-in-law, is going to Halifax. Well, one might assume that he's going there to help Sir George Prevost, but there's rumors here in Ghent that he's going there to join with the forces already in Canada and lead them to the Gulf Coast.
All the more reason then, sir, for us to strain every nerve in convincing these commissioners from England that they have nothing to gain and everything to lose by continuing this war. And, of course, that status quo antebellum is the most intelligent path to take. In addition, you and I both know that matters are not well in Europe for England and her allies. In fact, there is even talk of the ministry withdrawing Wellington from his post in Paris to preserve him from the unrest in that capital and be prepared to send him and his troops back into battle against whom? Napoleon? That eagle will fly again, I warrant you.
I hear that Lord Castlereagh, their foreign minister, is on his way to consult with his allies in Europe. I think the result of that meeting, he's going to have new instructions for Admiral Gambier and his commission. And I think it will be instructions that they will not like.
And so then, sir, let us gather our other 3 commissioners together and make our case fully prepared that the status quo antebellum is the intelligent path to pursue. And let us also take our fullest advantage of our victories at Baltimore and, of course, most recently at Plattsburgh in our negotiations.
I have news! Glorious news! Definitive news! News that will permanently quell your fears and unrest! We have secured peace with Great Britain!
The Treaty of Amity and Peace has arrived from Ghent and is in this very box. It has just been delivered from the Senate with their approbation and now needs only the stroke of my quill, and it will be official. Indulge me a moment if you would. There. It is done. The Treaty of Amity and Peace will prove that these United States of America have a place on the world stage. It will stand as a testament to our country's resolve that freedom is so sacred that men will always be ready to fight for their liberties. That the government, under the United States Constitution, will stand by its principles and protect the rights of her citizens. And that even lesser powers can defeat mightier ones when truth is on her side. Although it is frigid outside, my heart swells with a warm satisfaction that our citizens can now go about their daily business with relief and confidence. May this be, as Mr. Adams said, the last treaty of peace between our countries. May the overarching hand of Providence make it so. Well, I believe we have reason to celebrate. Mrs. Madison's next Wednesday evening drawing room promises to have some extra punch. It will be here at the Octagon House, and I hereby invite every one of you to attend. May you rest comfortably, going home tonight with the strength of our peace guiding you home. Adieu, and huzzah!
Huzzah for President Madison!
Thank you everyone for coming. The actors and I will still be around for the rest of the encampment should you like to engage us of discourse of a public or private nature. I hope that you enjoyed our performance. It will be repeated in Plattsburgh, New York on September the 9th. It's a Saturday during the Battle of Plattsburgh commemoration. Saturday night at City Hall, 7 p.m. and we hope we can see some of you there. We have an information table over here should you like more information, etc. Our congratulations to you, our great citizens of the United States of America.